Hi, I'm Staci Neustadt, speech language pathologist and CEO at Making Sense of Autism. We have Susan Golubock, our founder, and we often chat about either some struggles that arise in the world of therapists or parents. Today, I want to shift a little bit and talk about my journey as a speech language pathologist in the area of social communication. So back in the day, I would oftentimes use the materials that were developed by a speech language pathologist until the neurodiversity movement really made headway and I started learning more about that. And I started learning about ableism and I started learning about how our role is not to make autistics neurotypical. It is to support their social communication and the way they socialize. Now, Sue, the question is for you is obviously I'm not autistic. I do have ADHD. And so I have my own struggles when it comes to social communication. I'm very aware of those things. But when it comes to the experience of an autistic with social communication, I know, you weren't identified autistic until you were 50, and I don't know if you knew your social communication looked different. Tell us a little bit about your early experiences and social communication, how it impacted your communication with others.
I didn't have any labels for it then, but I definitely knew I was different. Number one, I would spend hours playing with two clothespins, and you can equate it to, okay, you play with dolls. Yes, I was practicing communication, but never with words. It was always intonations. I was a Gestalt language learner, so I would pick up on the most important part of communication is how you say it, how other people say it, not necessarily the words themselves. I mean, my mother would bribe me at age 2 to say single words. And if I wanted the cookie, I would say it. But when I finally spoke, it was in whole sentences or phrases. Um, and it was simply a matter I would pick up in certain situations that this cluster of words had a special meaning. And therefore, then I would use those words later to communicate. So the way that I learned language was different than most people learn language. So, yes, autistics are very insistent. Please use words accurately, concretely, literally, the way we are taught. We don't pick things up intuitively. That's part of the social. You pick up on nuances. Typical people have shortcuts. They don't want to say it in a long sentence, so they come up with these short little phrases that everyone catches on and they know what that means. Well, I don't pick things up intuitively. So, can you see how all of this is going to impact on my ability to communicate with someone who is speaking a different way, even though they're using a common words, and I could understand each word, but not in the context or the way in which you use those words. So a lot of time, because I also have auditory processing delays, it's take much longer to process. I'm always playing catch up, trying to scan your speech for the key words that would give me a clue what you're talking about. So I'm not processing every single word, and I may miss some keywords like not, which changes the whole context. So social interactions is a lot of work as far as auditory processing, understanding how you're using those words and in what context and what does it mean when you switch it around or you use it differently than I would use it, or you don't use the word as accurately as I've learned that's how it's supposed to be used. But in addition to that, now I'm dealing with the effort that I have to put into coordinating breathing and speaking, um, uh, with all these other challenges going on. So by the time I have formulated a response to something you're saying, you've already moved on, because that short little pause
Mm.
that you may give me that says you're at the end of a sentence and it's okay. Otherwise, I'm rude if I interrupt. Do you see all the challenges that I am facing and why social communication is work for me? It's not, I mean, I was stunned when I realized that people, social communication is a form of relaxation for them.
Mm.
They actually feel better after it. I'm exhausted after it.
So we know that as we're learning about autistic social communication, autistics don't like small talk. So all those challenges you just talked about, is it because small talk requires so much auditory processing, requires so much language thinking on the spot? And that makes sense. So with our My Communication checklist, we have where an individual might want to work on starting or finishing conversations or joining a group. Knowing what we know about the autistic brain, that they do and prefer to talk about their special interests, how do we bridge that strength in talking about their special interests and their desire to start conversations with others?
Starting and stopping are executive functioning. That's inhibition and excitation. And excitation, once we get going and don't know how to stop. Um, but once we're stopped, it takes us a while to initiate either. So if we're listening, shifting to uh, uh, initiating a response or interjecting our thoughts takes time. Oftentimes, the neurotypical, we take more time. And if they don't give us that time, then we're stuck at, if I really want to say it, I'm going to override you. I'm going to interrupt because I don't know how else to get that timing in there, because you don't pause long enough for me to make that shift. So I totally ignore what you're saying while I'm preparing my mind, and then I blurt it out. So this business of give and take in conversation is really difficult. Now, the way I learned, I was riding in the car with another OT. She would make a statement and then ask me a question. I very quickly picked up on the pattern. Oh, okay. So I answer her and then I ask her a question. That taught me about the give and take of a conversation. But because she was patient enough to wait for me to respond to her question. See, other people, when they're typical, they're just talking. And if they pause, then another person jumps in. You don't have this. You are deliberately giving me time by asking a question. So, of course, you're going to wait for the answer. Now you're giving me time to give an answer. And I quickly picked up on patterns, because that's what what autistics do. And I modeled her, mimicked her, and then I would ask her a question. We went the whole hour and a half it took to drive down there doing that. And it was like, oh my God, this is what a two-way conversation is supposed to be. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. And I discovered that too when I realized that when I was talking about something I was interested in, I wanted to find out, are they actually listening to what I'm saying? So I started stopping mid-sentence. 100% of the time, no one ever noticed. They took the fact that I stopped as a pause, that I was done. And they were just waiting for me to pause so that they could say something. So the reality is, it doesn't work the way they say it's supposed to. And you can teach us that's how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
But we very quickly realize that's not how it works.
Right. We don't
So
even understand how conversation works,
I
it sounds
know
like.
because it happens so easily and intuitively to you. You're picking up and your connections are going rapid, rapid, rapid. We can't keep up. It's too hard. Now, when we're autistic with autistic, we can better control it because number one, we know, and there's plenty of autistics I know that have never learned how to stop. Once they get on their special topic, man, and I have to interrupt and let them know, I think what you're saying is absolutely valuable, but you're not giving me a chance to say what I think is valuable. Um, and blunt honesty works between autistics, but I can't say that to a neurotypical. They'll be offended. So this is where culturally there's a difference. Autistics can socialize with other autistics, but when it comes to non-autistics, um, we are two different cultures and we don't seem to know each other's cultural rules.
So you mentioned you're blunt. Would that be okay if non-autistics are blunt and say, hey, I hear what you're saying. That's pretty cool. I'd love to share my perspective. Is that
Yes,
what we should be doing?
yes.
Awesome.
I mean,
Okay.
I have recommended that to my family in dealing with my younger sister who's autistic and would even stand outside the bathroom door. They were trying to escape her and she would continue talking. And I told them, you just have to tell her, whoa, hold on. Uh, you know, this is what I need from you. Um, and she'll accept it. And I modeled it for them. And their response was, well, that may work for you, but it doesn't work for me because they didn't want to make the change.
So you're right. It definitely takes two sides. And I know that's a giant challenge that we see among people who are open to our neuro strength-based support for autism and those who aren't ready for it yet. And everyone is ready in their own time. So those that are ready to make the shift, that are ready to make changes to support their autistic loved ones, their autistic clients, or autistic students, um, you might need to make some changes in how you
Yeah.
communicate. And I know that what I've seen with autistic adults that I work with, when I give that pause that you're talking about, they feel so seen and heard that that's what they needed, that that
Mm-hmm.
connection is instant because they're like, wow, you're not talking over me. You're giving me time to process. So it's huge.
Yeah. And I really think the example that I was taught by a neurotypical of making a statement, asking a question, deliberately turning over the process to the other person to teach the autistic what give and take conversation actually, that it can work and what it's like. That's the best way to teach us. Now, then you're going to have to also let us know it doesn't always work that way. And what can they do to advocate to the other person to say, hey, it would really be helpful if you would ask me a question of what you would like in the way of a response from me.
Mhm.
For those of us that are good listeners, but difficulty initiating. And for those who are over talkative, again, yeah, blunt honesty works very well for us in terms of letting us know, whoa, hold on. There's something I need to say.
Wonderful. So two big things. We definitely need to just close our mouth sometimes and allow for a pause. And then blunt feedback, not rude feedback, but blunt feedback. Hey, I like your information, but I want to share too. So two really good things. So Sue, I often see where people comment that a student or a child scores well on pragmatic language tests. So they know how to socialize, they know what to do, but they're not doing it. Explain your perspective on that theory and that perception.
There's a big difference between knowing what you need to do and the ability to actually do it. Because by the time the speed at which I'm able to process and then initiate a response without overriding someone. All of that coordinating all those connections within the brain is inconsistent and it takes much longer. So the execution part of it is the hard part, not the knowledge of what I should do. It's it's just pulling it all together and coordinating. Um, and like I said, even the motor breathing and the thinking, all of that together is so much effort that executing it is too hard. And then you're talking about small talk. You're not even talking about meaningful conversation. I'm not going to waste my breath and my time on meaningless conversation. This is
So,
why autistics don't tolerate small talk.
so is there support we should provide, or is it the change in how we view that what needs to happen? Support, or we need to shift our view?
How about both? If you shift your view to realize you're talking with an autistic, and what you know about autism is that it's hard work for us to socialize. Even when we have the knowledge, it's still hard work. Um, and yet, then how about support so to make it easier, i.e., um, teaching us about the reason you do small talk. There is a purpose behind it. You may not think about it, but there is a reason you do small talk. You're putting out feelers to see just how receptive that person's going to be to your ideas. So you talk around things, not really directly at them. See, we want it to be condensed. Just give me the meat and let me process that. Keep it short, simple. I can process it. And that would be nice in the way of support if, yes, you could be more concise, direct, more get to the meaningful part of what you're trying to communicate with an autistic. But it takes that initial, I am aware of the fact that I'm talking to an autistic, not another neurotypical. Both.
Are there anything that we're doing that is harmful that we should stop?
Yes. Making subconscious expectations, expecting us to be like them, because typical people, they don't even have to think about their brain. It works so easily and automatically. The connections are so fast that they can't even imagine that it could be a struggle for someone else because they haven't experienced what we experience. So yes, be aware of the fact that are you making these assumptions that they're going to understand everything you say the way you say it, that if we have something to say, we're going to speak up and know when without being rude to bring it up. Make assumptions that we have the same abilities that you have, because that is what makes it so stressful for us, is because people are making expectations and assumptions, not, I mean, deliberately or negatively, but they're assuming that we're like them.
Great advice as always. Wonderful. Thank you, Sue.
Thanks for asking, Staci.